Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your work on Marvel 616. And I will be directing questions individually so we can sort of make the Zoom situation work. Wanted to ask Gillian, I heard the podcast you did with Busy and Casey and Shantira, and I know that the process of getting ready to do this episode in particular, was requiring reading lots of comics. And I love how in your episode it is addressed that notion of what's supposed to be for males and comics are supposed to be for males and certain things are for females. So I wonder, had you had a relationship with comics before, or were you part of that sort of not interested because it was something that was not for you?
Yeah, I remember reading a lot of Garfield with my cousin when we were little, but I did not read Marvel comics as a kid. And I'm sad that I didn't, because I discovered so many comics while working on this episode that I know I would have loved. I loved reading as a kid, just comics were not part of that. And it was really interesting also to learn about all the different genres of comics that used to exist within the industry. Teen comics, horror comics, romance comics, detective noir comics. And so it made me a little sad that some of those have gone away, and that when you think of comics now, you only think of superheroes, because I think there is a rich history within the comic book industry of all different types of stories and genres that would have appealed to me as well. So yeah, I was not a comic book reader as a child, but I sort of fell in love with comics through working on this episode.
All right. Any title that you think you're going to follow up even on your free time?
Yeah, I think everyone on this call really loves Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan. So she became a favorite.
Yeah, that's definitely. So Alison, let me ask you this. How was it sort of placing yourself in sort of how difficult, because you feel so much for these kids in your episode, and you capture their stories beautifully, but you sort of were you able to be the objective observers and not like coach them and with their nerves and and help them out before they went on stage?
I actually think I was able to be very objective with the episode, and probably because I relate so much to those kids, because I mean, it's the reason why I was asked to direct this episode and why I really wanted to, is that I was very much involved in my high school theater program and so passionate about it, and remember what an impact it had on me and on my life. And so there was like a big nostalgia factor, and certainly there was a lot of identifying. The second I stepped into that auditorium and met all the students, I was kind of like, oh, that's a young me, and that's a young me, and that's a young. I felt like there was a lot I could identify with all of the students. But at the same time, because I have had such similar experiences, I don't know. I guess I was able a bit to take a step back and kind of see the bigger story of how things related back to Marvel and really what they were taking from their characters in these plays. And I think a large part of that too is that my producer, Claire DeGrasse, she did a lot of the interviews with the students. So I was kind of in and out of that process in terms of boots on the ground. And I was able to watch a ton of footage, send her questions, but keep a bit of a distance, which became really helpful in the editing process, where I think Claire herself probably was even more attached to everyone. And I was a bit more like, we got to think globally here. But definitely I felt like I was falling in love with all of them.
No, that makes the episode wonderful. So Jason, let me ask you this, because I think what I admire the most about the series is sort of the daring of just making Marvel the common thread, but each episode gets to be its own thing, as opposed to there's this notion that we want to just consume the same format over and over and over. That's not true. So how quickly did you know that was going to be the jumping off point for the series?
I mean, we knew it from the outset, because when you looked at the history of Marvel and the different avenues that we knew that we were going to probably try and pursue, there was no way to format it to where there was a one-size-fits-all. So it naturally shifted it into the idea of wanting to be an anthology series. And from that standpoint as well, then bringing in other filmmakers who can really put their hands on it and make it their own and run with it creatively. That became the exciting part, quite honestly. It's always a challenge when you break away from format. It's the tired and true thing. But in a way, it's like, I think looking back, it was definitely the right decision, because there's a way for an audience to have any number of entry points into this series. There are people who may not feel the love for Marvel that they think that they should have from the comics or from the movies, but you don't have to have any knowledge base with either of those things to watch Alison's episode. It's a slice of life, a look at a high school, theater program. Like, you don't have to have any additional context for it. While at the same time, I love the episode that we do about cosplay, as something that people look at from a distance and go, oh, I that's definitely not a community for me. But when you actually understand the reason why people do it, it opens up a whole new way of thinking. So it's using Marvel as, I think, something that people, at least they know and they're familiar with, but it's providing them a whole new way of interacting with it.
Yes. So Gillian, let me ask you this. Did you see a parallel? Because I thought it's interesting how you were able in your episode to sort of go into the details with sort of how Miss Marvel and how the representation of women and all that sort of stuff. But I saw similarities in terms of how women contributed and then went away from consuming comics with the industries. Like in the 30s and the 40s, women were very much involved, and then the 50s came. It's like, did you see the parallel? Because it's very like what happened in your industry in Hollywood. Like, women dominated the 30s and the 40s. Did you see that big picture from the very beginning? And was it interesting sort of interweaving that narrative?
I was muted. Everything you're saying, yes. And women were in Hollywood. I've bored Alison and Jason by repeating this, but women writing and directing films in the 19-teens, in the earliest days of silent era, I saw a real strong parallel here comic industry. And then, yes, it was really interesting to sort of chart the representation of Carol Danvers as the character, Captain Marvel, over the decades, and how that was impacted by changes within the comic industry, and then really culminating with Kelly Sue DeConnick taking on the character, reimagining it, and what a huge impact that had. Obviously, they made an entire film starring Brie Larson about Captain Marvel, and that character in its current incarnation is sort of reimagined by Kelly Sue has had such a profound impact on people. So yes, obviously, great question. All the sort of things we were talking about in the edit.
Well, what do you think? I mean, which is something that Gina Davis has mentioned in the fact, I thought Thelma and Louise in the theater, that felt revolutionary. But, why doesn't the industry get it right? And I know we don't have time enough, to sort of take that on, but given that you've done several documentaries on that subject, what do you think it is that it doesn't just hit like a tidal wave and we keep sort of going around the same issue?
I don't know, but you and I are reading the same things, because I also love Gina Davis's work with her foundation about representation of women in media, and a lot of the issues that she's brought to light through that have really impacted the way I think, questions I ask about scripts, and so I don't know, but I think I'd love to talk to Gina. Maybe you and I can interview Gina Davis after today.
I don't think you need me, so but I think you are doing fine. And Alison, I was going to ask you another question, but my time is up. And Gillian, I've been sort of bothering Casey St. Ange, and she said to tell you that she loves you. So I'm just delivering the message. So you guys stay healthy wherever you are. And thank you so much for your time. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mom.
Guys, have a good day.
You too.